All right, hello and welcome back. Sorry, I was having a little bit of a time getting to the site. I hope you're having a great week. To this week, we're talking about Article 2 of the Constitution and the executive branch. You've already read Article 2, so I'm not going to go line by line from it. You've read through it. I think you've probably got it. You've seen the example for the other ones. So I want to dive right into talking about the presidency and the executive branch. So to start with, the president is the commander in chief, right? He is in charge of the military and the entire defense establishment. Now, here's something to remember. The Constitution gives Congress the power to declare war, not the president. But the last time that Congress declared war was back in 1941 at the start of World War II, right? We've had many conflicts, we've had many wars since then, but we haven't actually declared war. What's going on here is a thing that for the Constitution was brilliant, but times have changed and technology has changed, right? So the Constitution says Congress can declare the war, and then once after Congress has declared war, the president can fight the war. The purpose of this is to separate powers so that nobody gets too powerful. Here's the problem. Back when this was written, the fastest mode of transportation was by ship, right? Not even like a ship with like a motor, but like a sailing ship. And this moved really slow by modern standards, right? So let's say that our spies showed up and was like, "Hey, Britain is planning on going to war. We think they're going to be here in like 2 months, maybe 3 months." Well, we would have time. Congress could debate about what to do. They could pass over, control to the president. The president could start organizing a military, all of that sort of thing. We live in a different world today. Today, if a country decides to shoot missiles at us, it could be hours, maybe even minutes, depending on what country it is, before those missiles start hitting. We don't have time for Congress to get together and debate about what to do. So here's what we did. In 1973, we passed the War Powers Resolution. It gives the president the power to commit troops for 60 days without congressional approval. If within 60 days he hasn't gotten congressional approval, he has 30 days to bring the soldiers back home. So ultimately, the president has 90 days to fight a conflict, a war, whatever we want to call it, without congressional approval. Now, here's something else I want you to take note of. A change in vocabulary. According to the Constitution, Congress declares war. But according to the War Powers Resolution, Congress gives approval, right? These are different words. To declare war means to initiate the war, right? But to approve means to support, right? So what if Congress never declares war, but they donate money to the war effort that the president has already started, right? Congress is in charge of the budget. So what if Congress budgets for the war? Would you give money to something you don't approve of? Probably not, right? So if Congress budgets money to a war by giving money to the war effort, are they saying that they approve of the war? This is up for debate. But the thought is that yes, if they give money to the war effort, they are approving of the war, which means the president can fight the war according to the War Powers Resolution. Some people think that this should change, that Congress should actually have to declare war. It shouldn't be enough to just give money to the war effort. But Congress kind of likes it this way because they don't have to take responsibility. Going to war is risky politically, right? And Congress gets the best of both worlds. If we go to war and we win, then Congress gets to say, I supported the war. I voted to fund the war. If we go to war and we lose, or it turns out in a way we didn't want, then Congress can say, I never voted to declare that war. I never really supported the war. I just gave money to the war effort because I didn't want our soldiers to be there without guns, right? So Congress supports this because it gives all the responsibility, all the blame to the president, right? And this is, I don't want to go with either party, putting them on the spot, because both parties do this, and both parties have done this for a long time. So Domestic use of the military. Can the president use the military, deploy the military domestically? Yes, right. The first president to do this was George Washington. A bunch of farmers in Pennsylvania rose up in anger in what was called the Whiskey Rebellion, and George Washington personally led military into the field to put down the rebellion. Today, the president can do the same. If he believes there is a threat to the U.S. or its policies, then soldiers can be sent in. An example would be segregation of schools, specifically Little Rock, Arkansas, right? If you know the story about Little Rock Consolidated ISD, and you had black students who were trying to go to the white school, and they had a right to because of Plessy, or not because of Plessy, because of Brown versus Board, right? This was after Brown versus Board. They had a right to go to the white school, but the entire town came out and would not let them enter the school. So the president sent in soldiers to escort the students into class. Also, if asked to by the legislature of a state, if there's a disaster, if there's riots, if there's something like that, the military can be deployed domestically. Oh, I was feeling fancy that day I made this PowerPoint. Judicial power. The president has the power to grant pardons and amnesties. So a pardon is where someone is forgiven for their crime. An amnesty is where an entire group of people gets a pardon. So an example, 1973, Richard Nixon was he was going to be impeached, but he resigned. So he got put on trial. The next president, Gerald Ford, pardoned him. It was very controversial, right? In 1868, the Civil War had ended in 1865, and there was questions of what to do with the South. Some people wanted to go down and arrest every Southern politician, every Southern general, some even every Southern soldier, and hang all of them for treason against the United States, for going to war against the United States. But Andrew Johnson, the president at the time, gave amnesty to the entire South, right? So that would be an example of amnesty. In 1977, if you remember 1975, the Vietnam War ended, and there were all these people who fled to Canada or were in hiding because they got drafted and they didn't want to go. In 1977, Jimmy Carter pardoned all draft resistors, so that was a blanket amnesty. Also, most presidents issue many pardons during their last month of the presidency. The thought is they have all these people that they want to pardon, but that's not very popular because we're in America, we believe if you do the crime, you should do the time. That's a common belief, you see. So most Americans don't really think too highly of pardons. So their last month as president, nobody's paying attention. They're all focused on the incoming president. So then you see a lot of pardons. Down at the bottom in the picture, there's also this kind of goofy tradition that we do. Every Thanksgiving, the president pardons a turkey. And it's kind of a lighthearted, kind of joking thing, but it's a tradition. And a turkey doesn't have to become Thanksgiving dinner. Instead, it gets to go live its life out on a farm. It gets the president's pardon. And there's a picture of Obama. Obama used to always take his daughters in, and he would tell silly jokes, and they would laugh and look embarrassed about their dad telling bad jokes. And it was kind of a funny thing. But all presidents do this. So, yeah. Diplomatic power, the power to make treaties with other countries. So a treaty is an agreement between the United States and another country. Now, it has to be supported by the president and approved by the Senate for a treaty to happen. Now, sometimes the president just can't do a treaty, right? Let's say that the president and the Senate are different parties and they're not agreeing. Then the president won't be able to get a treaty. But the president can do what's called an executive agreement, which is an agreement between the president and another nation. Now, notice, it's not an agreement between the United States and another country. It's an agreement between the president and another country. So when we get a new president, it will be up to the next president to determine whether they want to continue that executive agreement. But a treaty is permanent. Also, executive power. We tend to say the buck stops here for the president. Anything in the country that goes wrong, it's the president's fault. Is that fair? I don't know. Probably not. But that tends to be how people look at it, right? So the president appoints all executive officials. So he appoints the secretaries of each department. He appoints the head of different agencies, right? Now, one issue affecting this is executive privilege, the belief that in order for the president to work effectively, all communications between him and his staff should be secret. Imagine that we're going to have a meeting and we're going to debate how we're going to deal about some kind of policy, right? And suppose the TV cameras are there. I want your honest opinions about things. Are you going to give me your honest opinion if there's TV cameras and you're put on live TV? No, you're going to have prepared remarks. You're going to stand up and give a speech for the cameras. That's not very good decision making. Decision making works much better when people can speak what's really on their mind without having to put on a show. So for this reason, there's the belief in executive privilege that the communications between the president and their staff should be secret. But on the other hand, there's the issue of the people's right to know. You're supposed to represent the voters. You're supposed to do what the voters want. We pay your salary, right? So you shouldn't have these secret meetings. There's a debate between these two philosophies, but we tend to say that there is this executive privilege, that these meetings can be kept secret. And maybe 50, 100 years later, the notes will be released, but for the most part, there are secrets. But there is a limitation. The case of U.S. versus Nixon in 1974 said that if there is a suspicion of illegal activity, the courts can require that those secret communications be turned over. Legislative power, the president can veto acts of Congress. Every year, the president goes and gives the State of the Union address where he talks to Congress and says, this is what we've done the past year. This is what I want to do the next year. And his party stands to their feet and claps about everything he says. And the other party sits there and looks grumpy. Is this even worth watching? It depends. If the president and Congress are from the same party, yes. Watch, because the president is saying, this is what I want you to do, and they're going to do it. If the president and Congress are from different parties, it's kind of just for show. The president's going to go up there and say, this is what I want to do, and Congress isn't going to do any of it. Now, an executive order. What if the president wants to pass a law, but he can't? Many times the president can do what's called an executive order. It's a rule, right? So imagine you're the local sheriff. And let's say you only have 5 deputies, but you have 50 stop signs, and you want to make sure nobody runs any stop signs. Well, you can't catch everybody who runs every stop sign. But what you can do is say, we have accidents at these 5 stop signs, so we're going to enforce the rules at these 5 stop signs, and we're going to ignore it at the others, right? Or we can't enforce every law because we'd be overwhelmed, so we're going to let some of them go. But here's how we're going to enforce these laws. That would be an executive order. One famous executive order from the Obama administration was called DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. Basically, this made it to where if you were brought here as a child illegally, then you wouldn't be deported. You would have to come forward and get a background check. You would have to pay a lot of money in fees. You would have to get fingerprinted, all this kind of stuff, but you wouldn't be deported, right? You would be safe from deportation. This was put in place by Obama because they couldn't pass immigration reform. One of the first things Donald Trump did when he came into office was he tried to end DACA, but the attorney general from California and Washington, they got together and they sued the Trump administration and basically made it harder for Trump to end DACA. And we're not quite sure what's going to happen. It's going to the Supreme Court. So at least as the time when I'm making this, we're not sure what's going to happen. All right. The presidency as an institution, the president has his cabinet, which are the heads of executive agencies. He has his White House staff, his advisors. They advise him on lots of things. There you can see Obama's top staffers and some of Trump's first top staffers. Some of them have stepped down. There's the vice president who becomes president. He's the president in waiting if something happens to the president. And then there's the first spouse, the first lady, who typically kind of does ceremonial type things. Hillary Clinton did healthcare, Michelle Obama, childhood obesity, Barbara Bush, read to children, and so forth, right? But anyway, moving on to the departments of the executive branch in the next video.